Welcome to Skill Builder. I'm Robin Clevett. Now I'm asked all of the time, might be by an apprentice or even a customer saying to me, I wish I could cut a piece of wood straight or something like that. So I want to just do some simple techniques to sort of take the myths out of cutting wood. So when I was at college in 1986, we used to use a handsaw that had to be sharpened. Indeed, the first thing we did was make a device for putting our saw in to sharpen it. And it's a tedious job. You set your saw in and then you use a small triangular file and you file in every direction and then you file back in every direction using the same amount of pressure. It's a little bit of an art, something you've got to learn. And then you set all of the teeth, which basically means as the saw gets a bit dull, the teeth start becoming straight, and as you set them, you turn every other tooth like this, and that creates the set, and the set is what enables you to cut, because if there wasn't a set on a saw, it would bind. Nowadays, everyone generally buys a throwaway saw. What we do is we use them, then we give them to the bricklayer, and the bricklayer will then take the life out of them on his thermalite block cuts and that sort of stuff. This is a small type of throwaway saw. We'll talk about this saw. If you're starting out, it's a good one to try first, just to get used to the feeling and technique. Then you've got a coping saw. So this is actually for carpentry and joinery, for doing scribes and miters. You might have seen that in some of the videos we've done on Skill Builder. And sometimes the saws get a bit dull and a bit old, and partly that's because you leave them out and they get a bit of a shower on them and a bit of rust builds up, so it's good to clean them off. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But for this video, I'm just going to use an off-the-peg saw. These ones I was getting 3 for £10 in Howden's, which is a big joinery supplier in the UK. So there's nothing special about it. And then for quite a lot of carpenters and joiners, we use a Japanese pull saw, but I'm not going to show you what that's all about. It's more likely you're going to cut yourself with one of these. But that is a Japanese pull saw for everyone who says, oh, I don't use a handsaw anymore, I use a pull saw. But we'll talk about that in another video. So this is a hard point saw, which in layman's terms mean that they treat that edge, they heat that edge up and make it super, super hard. Always buy a saw by the number of teeth. Now this is what we call universal, so it's suitable for cross-cutting, which is across the grain, and it's also suitable for ripping. But if you're doing a lot of cross-cutting or a lot of ripping, it may be worth getting one with the right number of teeth. For cross-cutting or fine work, you want a few more teeth. What seems to be really common in London is what we call the 20-inch variety. I think it's the 500mm variety. And then the one here, which is the universal, is 550mm, which is roughly 2 inches longer. I'll just show you that. So if you're going to start out, or you're going to watch this video and think, I'm going to go and buy one of these saws, just go for a 20 or a 500. That's probably ideal, because you're probably not going to be able to use the full length of the saw until you've got a bit of practice, but we will talk about that. And it is intended to be used the full length of the saw, but it does take a bit of practice. Obviously, if you're only using the middle, that becomes dull and the ends become sharp, so you want to wear it all out at the same pace. So first of all, I'm just going to cut through a piece of wood. I'm not going to mark it, I'm going to cut through it, and you can just watch me. I'm not going to describe how I do it, just watch how it's done. So it's a lovely feeling when you cut through a piece of timber. This is a really nice piece of structural timber. It's lovely and dry as well, so I thought this would make a good example. Pick up a wet bit, sometimes it's a different story. I've been a carpenter for over 35 years. I could pick a saw up and cut a bit of wood, and believe it or not, I don't know how this happens. It just always becomes true. It's almost like once you've got that technique, everything just wants to be plumb, parallel, true and square. So let's talk about the basics. You'll see me kneeling on this bit of wood like this. And that's because that's what I do. But if you're starting out, you probably want to clamp your timber. Keep your hands behind the cutting edge. Don't get too close to it. You use your thumb or your finger to sight your saw up, of course. When you're starting off, is literally just getting that saw to start. With a saw like this, where the teeth are favouring just one way, it's almost cutting on the push stroke. You want to just draw the saw back to make a small notch or a groove. So basically like, I'm not pushing that much on the front, I'm pulling back. If you start by pushing really hard in that corner, it might skip off and put a cut all the way down there. For practice, get a T-square or a set square and mark a line about 1 inch in or so. Across the top and down the edge. It's good to practice on a piece of timber which is pretty thick. The idea of this is shoulder, elbow, wrist is all in line. We're not doing that, we're not doing that. See that? Like a robot. If you're starting off here, everything is in line. So I'm going to start by just drawing that back to get a start basically. So if you have a look at that, carry on like that. Until you're almost to there and almost to there. But 45 degrees. Now what you've got yourself is a bit of a guide for the saw to follow. And what we're going to be doing is pushing through and just dropping the back down as we go, all right? So there we've cut from that corner to that corner now. So what we're not doing is like jigsawing. We're not going like that, and we're not going like that. We're working through the timber from that corner to that corner, just gradually working it through. We'll carry on like that. And you can hear now that what I'm cutting is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which means that you want to ease on that pressure because you don't want to split that bit of wood out, you don't want it to break off. So as you hear it, and you can see how close I am now, there and there, I'm only 3 or 4 strokes away from getting through. So it's a matter of and that's it, and you're not going to break anything out. If you haven't got a square, you can use these saws because they have actually got a 90-degree angle there and a 45 there, which simply means by resting that on there, that's at 90. And if you also want a 45, you can rest it on that axis. Mark along here. You don't want to be marking along the teeth because it won't be anywhere near 45. And you'll have no lead left in your pencil. So obviously it's important to have a sharp saw. Don't go and pick one up out of the shed which is covered in rust and cut it. You're likely to skip off and cut your thumb. The secret is letting the saw do the work. These have been perfectly engineered for the job. And what I mean by letting the saw do the work is once you're started and you're in, it's not all about this. It's not about that at all. It's more gentlemanly like that. We're just going to let the saw run and do its work. Hardly any pressure. Really light. I'm not gripping on for dear life either. I'm just holding it. My fingers here. So this is softwood, and I've got a piece of hardwood here. Now this hardwood is not only very hard, it's very old, lovely and dry. It's got a really tight, hard grain. So the saw behaves a little bit differently when you're cutting into this, and You could use a much finer saw blade if you were doing something, especially smaller sections of hardwood. You definitely want a fine blade then. But this universal will cope with it just fine, and you've just got to treat it in exactly the same way. But when you start off, you'll find that it starts creating quite a big groove. It's actually a delight to cut. I'll do one with the little saw to see, so you can see the difference. It's much smaller than I'm used to. So, fine blade, took a long time to cut, but it gives you a very fine cut too. If you've got small sections, that's perfect, because this one here is just going to probably make a bit of a dodgy cut. Now this piece of timber here is typical to what I'm used to. It's cut across one side, and it's probably rounding over on the other side. That's what we're up against. So let's put a 45 through like a mitre, so it was upright. So I'll mark that through the top, then I'll mark it through each side. So the timber's got a little bit of a cut in it, and it's a little bit rounded over on that side. But again, I'm going to start by cutting across the top, and I'm going to look all the way through the side of the saw, down the pencil line all the way to the bottom. And instead of trying to watch the teeth and keep the teeth hard against that pencil edge, which has a tendency for you to overcompensate and go in and get out of alignment, we're basically going to follow it through. Now I can't really look at the back side of this, I'm going to rely on just the inside, and we'll see how well the outside comes out. I'm not even really looking at the line, I'm just looking at the saw overall, and I'm just relaxing, letting the saw do the work. You can see that we're right on the line, you know, it's no problem at all. But if you are starting out and you've got your work well secured, right, this is important, because for this technique, once you've come through the top, what you're going to do is you're going to cut through the back, and then you're going to look over, and you're going to look down, and you're going to follow the line on the outside. So for example, I'm looking down there, I'm cutting it there, then I'm putting it back, and cutting on the back. It's a little bit like a seesawing action. Going like that, coming across the back. You can see we're still skipping down the line. This is probably one of the hardest ways to cut with the material in the upright position. If it was on the flat, and you were trying to cut, this is particularly difficult too, because you can see what's happened. We're leaning over. So you could potentially hold the work level, cut like that, but when you start off and you slip down the timber and cut into your thumb, that's no good either. So this is a piece of 7x2, which is quite a big construction material, floor joist type material. So I thought I'd use this as an example. If you try it in a bit of 3x2, it might be a bit easier. look at this outside edge. If I fold over the grain, half the pencil line there, half the pencil line there, and that's probably what we want. And if you turn to the back, residue of lead, which is half the pencil line, and then on the top, half the pencil line, which is what we're aiming for. So another little technique is, if you use a knife, score the line, okay, a couple of little runs through. Quite often we use a marking knife in carpentry and joinery, and we follow that instead of the pencil. What we're aiming to do is that the outside set, or this side of the saw, is going to cut exactly along that line, and in fact it actually feels like it's running with the lines. I can actually feel it hook into that then. You can see how sharp that line is, and it's not chipping out or anything like that. That side, the set of the blade is in it. Just see how clean that cut is by doing the score with the knife. So let's do another 45 using the knife technique. We'll score it through. So therefore, you've just seen us do it with the knife, and I've just reversed this piece and put it against there. For a handsaw mitre, that's pretty good, considering that you get this cupping in the timbers that sometimes make it rock a bit. Quite often, if you're doing a decking job and you're running a deck right round the front like a riser, this is the perfect thing to do on the corner, and a handsaw is absolutely adequate to make a decent job of that. So I hope that's inspired you to go out and try for yourself how to cut a bit of wood straight, and maybe build an ark, because if this rain doesn't stop, we're all going to need one.
I'm Robin Clevett.
I'm Robin Clevett. This is Skill Builder. Thanks for joining me. See you again soon.